When business leaders at the Chamber think about education, it is within the context of workforce. Education and business have a special relationship with the mutual goal of community growth. A strong economic base means we need to work together to ensure that our workforce is prepared for the constantly evolving needs of business. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce tells us that our economy depends on highly innovative, creative, productive, and industrious workers. To sustain a 21st century workforce that can compete in a global economy, a strong education and workforce training system is necessary to align to economic development. These are crucial things that prepare young people for good jobs and bright futures. The Chamber tells us that 110 million Americans have the dignity of a job and the security of a paycheck because 33 million businesses of all types and sizes employ them. And that is exactly what an educated and trained workforce brings to our community and why this Chamber of Commerce embraces the work of our school district. Under the leadership of Superintendent Dr. Tammy Campbell, the renowned, I'm going to have so much fun with that. The vision of the school board and also the participation of many and varied stakeholders throughout the year. The school year is underway with a new strategic plan. This is not a plan that sits on a shelf. This is a plan that celebrates a mission-focused, culturally responsive, data-driven school system. That system fuels the commerce of our future by investing in those individuals, those scholars, and you see some of them with us here today, who are preparing for their place in the world. Yeah, you can stop and clap for that. I think that's worth it. Plus, they laughed at my Facebook joke, so. So the Chamber of Commerce is very pleased to welcome Superintendent Dr. Tammy Campbell to offer the business community our 2017 State of Education keynote on the Federal Way School District. Well, you know what? You're so renowned and you wear so many hats. I had to think where I was for a minute.
I'm going to use this one. I'm not going to use that one.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. What a nice reception to see so many people in the room, because it tells us how many people understand how important it is that our schools are functioning well. I want to start by thanking the Chamber for its vision in creating a space to showcase and outline the work that is occurring in our schools. Because our school system, you see, is the nursery of our democracy. It's the nursery of our democracy and the incubator for prosperity of our great city. At this time, I would like to thank my administrative team who are joining me today, because I have to tell you, I have some of the best people serving as principals, assistant principals, directors, deputies. Please stand. I want folks to know who's out there leading our schools and leading our efforts. As we've undertaken this idea of a new strategic plan, we had to have buy-in, and our administrators are all in, and I couldn't be prouder of you. I also want to take this time to thank, maybe this will help, I can hear a little bit of this feedback, to thank some of our scholars who are here. And we've invited members of the Superintendent's Advisory. I meet with scholars once a month. They give me feedback on how things are going. I'd like those scholars to please stand. They're pretty incredible. Stand, please. Charlie, stand. Charlie's not on my advisory, but he's also one of our scholars. Thank you, scholars. Scholars, I want to tell you, everything we do is in service of you. So we always have student voice and your interest at mind. So I just want to thank you. Lastly, I'd like to have the Board of Directors to please stand. And I want to thank each and every one of you. Just stand up. Carol, Claire and Liz. I want to thank you for the tireless work you do every day in ensuring Federal Way Public Schools is on a path of continuous improvement. This isn't easy work, but we're so aligned, and I'm so grateful to have you as partners in this work. Thank you. Do you know that young people often don't believe their own thoughts about themselves, about what's possible? They instead believe what the adults believe about them and what we convey about them. You think about that. I want you to think back to when you were in school. More specifically, I want you to think back to when you were in first grade. Jim, you think you can do that? Think back to when you were in first grade. You were probably 6 or 7. Well, for most of our scholars, this is a time of infinite hope and possibility about their future. At your table, I want you to make eye contact with someone, and I want you to imagine them as a first grader. I know this may be harder for some people than others, but try. Try. Hang in there with me. Okay, all right. I want you, as you're making eye contact, I want you to imagine all the attributes of youth that they would possess. For some in the room, it's probably easier to see these qualities in the person you're looking at. Imagine the hope, though, in their eyes. Imagine a few missing teeth. Maybe you hear the endless chatter, questions, why this, why that? Do you see their boundless energy, their curiosity, their insatiable desire to learn? This is a state of hope, engagement, and motivation that is nurtured in an environment. I want you, each of you, to call into view a person or people who believed in you and conveyed a positive mindset about your potential. Take a minute. Who comes to mind? Think about that. Your family. Maybe it was a teacher. Maybe it was a community leader, principals, or someone else. I think you're going to be hard-pressed to find someone in this room who would say that their first grade self didn't have a support system. You're going to be hard-pressed to find someone who walks the path to success without someone who's encouraging, believing in them. That ultimately is the work of the school system, as well as families. And specifically in Federal Way Public Schools, our work is to engage scholars in a way that their cumulative pre-K-12 experiences are ones in which they feel challenged, they feel belonging, they experience learning that engages both their minds and hearts, so they know without question that we believe in them and that their dreams are within reach. The work of the district, the community, and families is simply to do two things. Believe in our children and act upon those beliefs. That's our job. Hardwired in our new strategic plan is the belief in each and every scholar and the actions that we must take to actualize those beliefs. Today, I will provide you with an overview of data that will illustrate where we're leveraging quick wins. We're starting to see some immediate successes, those quick wins. Also, I'll be sharing with you how we're holding all schools accountable within Federal Way Public Schools with our 5 big goals and our signature strategies. We're moving away from each school doing it their own way to a system of schools ensuring that we have powerful learning and teaching in every classroom because we don't want to leave anything to chance. Our scholars are counting on us to do that. So let's take a look at some data. The first thing that I wanted you to pay attention to is our tagline. And you'll hear us talk about this. Each scholar, a voice, a dream, a bright future. 1,700 staff weighed in and selected this particular tagline. This really is our mission statement. It's how we're going to do business every day. When you look at our core beliefs within our strategic plan, I want you to pay especially close attention to a couple of them. The first one is that we believe that every scholar can learn at the highest level. And one of the things that we challenge each other to do is to not have these phrases like, well, those kids, yeah, they can, or those kids can't. That's the kiss of death. The minute you start doing that, you've written off groups of scholars. We simply don't do that in our system. The other belief that I'll draw your attention to is the second one, that we believe race, socioeconomic status, language, cultural background, and other exceptionalities should not be predictors of student achievement. So when we look at data, when we see varying groups every year, year in and year out, not achieving, we say to ourselves, what more can we do? How can we partner with our community? How can we partner with families? And then the last core belief that I will draw your attention to is that we believe that our families are critical partners in this work. Schools cannot do this work alone. And we're looking at all kinds of innovative ways to bring our families into the fold. Those are our core beliefs. I want to share with you some data points that indicate we're on the right track. The first is college-bound scholarships. If you don't know what college-bound scholarships are, they are a state-funded scholarship for our scholars who are low income. For example, a family of 4 earning $44,000 a year or less would qualify for this scholarship. There are 2 fascinating data points. When we look at our graduates who have moved on, our high school graduates, when we look at those low-income scholars who have signed up for college-bound scholarships, they graduate at 75%. Those scholars who are not signed up for college-bound graduate at around 60%. So right there, that scholarship is doing something in terms of graduation rate. They also looked at college students who were low income, who had a college-bound scholarship, and they asked them the question, how did this help you? 50% of them said that they would not have gone on to college had it not been for the college-bound scholarship. So this particular metric is really important. So in 2014, 76% of our scholars were signed up for college-bound scholarship. We have from 7th grade to 8th grade to do the sign-up. June 30th of their 8th grade year is the deadline for doing this. Look at what happened when we made it a goal. 2015-16, last year, we had 99% of all students who could have been signed up were signed up in Federal Way Public Schools. We're one of the top districts now in terms of college-bound sign-up. I'd like to give our administrators a round of applause for that. And of course, our goal is 100% every year. I have this quote that I tell our team, what gets measured gets done. And so this is something that will be on the radar, and every year we want to hit that target of 100%. Student-led conferences. We need to have our families coming to those conferences, hearing what their scholars need, how can they get better. In 2015-16, we had 73% of our families to come to those student-led conferences. This past year was a goal, and let's look. We had 87% come this past fall. 2016. I want to thank you again, principals, for getting the work out, but here's our goal. We want that number to be 100%, and we're going to continue to see that number improve. Attendance. As you know, Federal Way Public Schools is one of the districts that has the highest chronic absenteeism. And so in 2015-16, only 51% of our scholars were in class 95% of the time. So this has been a goal. And this year, how many of you have seen our yard signs, our billboards around attendance? We have a robust campaign. We're seeing an uptick. 2016-17, we've got 55% of our scholars attending class 95% of the time. If they're not in class, they can't learn. So this is something you're going to continue to see us have a robust effort around. Our goal in this area is 100%. Third grade reading. I will tell you that nationally, third grade reading is an area that needs improvement, but let's look at what's happening in Federal Way Public Schools. 2014-15, 39% of our scholars were achieving in English Language Arts, ELA, what we would call reading and writing. I want to make sure that it's understandable for all of those in the room today. For 2015-16, we are seeing a slight uptick of 42% of our third graders who are meeting standard on ELA, third grade. But here's what I want you to pay attention to, and this is what's happening across all of our schools. We now have targets for growth every year that our schools are really aiming for. And if you notice, next year, this coming year, 2016-17, our goal is to have 50% of our third graders meeting standard in ELA. By 2019-20, that should be 7 out of 10 or 70%. And we have to do these goals incrementally. You don't go from 30% to 100% in a year, because if you do, I would suspect something else is happening that's not probably right. We want to really do this the right way. Every school has these metrics, and we're monitoring this and sending this data out to our principals and our teachers. Third grade math, 2014, we had 48% of our scholars in third grade meeting standard, with just a bump of 1% 2015-16, which is negligible. Here are our targets, though. Our goal is 57% this year. By 2019-2020, we want to be at 73% of our third graders meeting standard in mathematics. What I will never do is just give you the glossed over positive story. I want you to really know what's going on inside of our system. I think that transparency is a part of the accountability that we hold ourselves to. Eighth grade, when you look at 2014-15, 50% of our eighth graders met standard in English language arts. 2015-16, that number jumped to 54%. Here are our targets for eighth grade ELA. By 2019-20, we want to be at 76%, and by the end of this school year, we want to be at 61%. These targets, again, are owned and shared at all of our middle schools, as well as our elementary schools who are getting our scholars ready for these assessments. This, by the way, the Smarter Balanced Assessment is the state assessment. This is a state test that is provided for our scholars to tell us how they're doing, not only in Federal Way, but across the state. Eighth grade math. 2014-15, 32% of our scholars met standard. 2015-16, 35%. When you look at the state average is somewhere around 50%, so it's not like all these school districts are knocking it out of the park. This is a new assessment, and so we're starting to see the incremental growth, not to make excuses, just to give you some sense of comparison. Here are our targets. Next year, we want to be at 45%. By 2019-20, we want to be at 66% of our scholars meeting standard in math on the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Another metric that we use, we know that when scholars drop out, they don't do it as seniors. They do it before that. So we're really paying close attention to ninth grade on track. And when we look at our ninth grade scholars who are on track for 2014-15, 60% of them had 6 credits or more. 2015-16, 69% of them had 6 or more credits. And we're really monitoring this. Our goal is 100% of our ninth graders. One of the most exciting things that I will tell you is that our graduation rates really are competitive for the region. We have seen a 4-year increase in graduation, and right now for 2016, we're at 80%. We're one of the highest 4-year graduation rates in the region of all the districts. Our extended graduation rate is right around 82%, that 5-year number. But that's not good enough. We've got targets. And as you can see, for 16-17, we want to be at 83%. By 2019-20, we want to be at 90%. These targets, again, are all linked up to our school improvement plans. So I've shared with you the targets. You've seen the data. What are we going to do about it? And I want to really quickly give you an overview of our strategic plan and some of the strategies that we're going to be utilizing. Our first pledge is to this idea around equity. And one of the things that we're engaged in, and I really couldn't be more proud of our board, we've been doing a lot of reading around racial equity and what it means to be culturally competent. We are the most diverse district in the state of Washington. And if we can't have conversations on these topics, we're not going to close gaps. When I met with my student advisors, my student advisors to the superintendent, one of the things that they told me at our last meeting was, Dr. Campbell, we want to talk to you about what it feels like to be different in our schools. They're nodding their heads. They want this to be the conversation, and we have to be able to engage our scholars on this. And I think this is bigger than the school district. I think the city should be having conversations. I applaud the Mirror for bringing conversations around equity to our newspaper. We all should be able to have these conversations. We're also doing this learning with our principals and our teachers, because our teachers are saying we want to be much more skilled in reaching and teaching all scholars, no matter where they live, no matter their zip code. So goal 1 of our strategic plan, I was pretty impressed with Bloodworks for really pulling out our goal like that. That was spot on. Our board, we were nodding and thinking, wow. That's the beauty of a strategic plan. People know how to partner with you, and you can see those linkages. The first goal is goal 1. And here are a couple of strategies. We're looking at the percent of scholars enrolled in high-quality preschool programs. We're also looking at the number of scholars who can read on grade level by 3rd grade. And one of the things that we're doing, we're looking at our Head Start ECAP programs and bringing in common curriculum for those younger scholars, partnering with our kindergarten teachers so that we know what is going to be expected in those early programs. Goal 2. This is the goal that all schools have. It's our district-wide goal. It's about the whole child. And in this particular goal, we're focusing on things like students being in class, that's the attendance piece. We're looking at student perception data. We're surveying all of our scholars to get a sense of, do they feel safe? Do they feel like school is a home game for them? And lastly, we're looking at the percent of scholars who complete 24 hours of community service before graduation. Our current 8th graders, who are going to be 9th graders next year, will be the first class who will have to have 24 hours of community service to graduate. We believe this is critical if they're going to be out in the community, working alongside community members. And more importantly, it allows our community to see and meet and get to know our scholars. Goal 3, active learners. There are a couple of things I want to point out. We're tracking the percent of scholars engaged in at least one extracurricular activity. Guess what we know? Every year, a scholar, especially in middle and high school, they should be engaged in one extracurricular activity. It allows them to feel belonging and connected. And so that's something that we're tracking. We're also going to be, again, looking at that student perception data. Things like robotics and those robotic clubs, the summer STEM camps that we had this past summer, we're going to continue to do those types of programs. This is really important. Goal 4, this is the heart and soul of what the strategic plan is about. And that first metric is the one that I think says it all. The percent of scholars meeting grade level standards in core subjects. If they're not learning and achieving at the highest levels, what are we doing this? What is this all about? So this really is one that we'll be looking at. And one of the things that we're doing, we're working to create common assessments within the district, not just waiting on the state to tell us how our scholars are doing, but our own assessments so that we can assess how they're doing mid-year before that state assessment happens, and then that way we can make adjustments as well as common curriculum across all of our schools. I've had people in the community say, you don't have common curriculum? No, we didn't. Individual teachers were creating their own different types of curriculum, which could lead to a lot of variability. And we know that curriculum writing is not easy. So those are just a few of the things that we're focusing on within Goal 4. Goal 5, persistence to graduation. You heard me talk about the percent of 9th grade scholars on track and on time for graduation. That's one thing, but I think one of the ones that I really want to call out, we're looking at the percent of scholars who have STEAM or STEM experiences, science, technology, engineering, or math. And if it's an A there, it's the arts. Woodmont and Nautilus are going to be our lighthouse STEM and STEAM schools. Our scholars are going to be engaged in project-based learning. We're going to have the kinds of experiences that really draw scholars in, as well as the TAF Academy, which is our only school that is a 5-year School of Distinction. That is a pretty rigorous bar. It's going to be relocated to Sahali, and Sahali will be now a STEM site, project-based, and taking that great track record of achievement to that school so that our scholars benefit there as well. And lastly, at graduation, one of the things that I noticed as scholars walked across the stage, I said, what are you going to be doing when you graduate? I don't know. Well, one of the things that we're going to do is to make sure they don't say that. They're going to have to complete a career plan letter that says what their intentions are. Are you going to college? Are you going to the military? Are you going to be taking up a trade? Industry certification, apprenticeships, all of that will start in their middle school years and work its way up through graduation. This is really important. Often I get people who will say, Dr. Campbell, I hear you talk a lot about college. What about those scholars who are going to do something else beside college? Here's the truth. 80% of jobs will require scholars to have another form of education beyond 12th grade. There's no getting around it. We want to be sure that they take advantage of those opportunities. There are a couple of other things that I think you need to know that we're getting close to what I would call, I don't want to use the word crises, but we're close. This is infrastructure. We have 39 sites, and of those 39 sites, 8 of those buildings are older than 50 years old. I want you to think about that. They're 50 years old or older. 11 of those sites are 40 years or older. So when you have schools that are in that shape, there's a lot of maintenance that you have to consider. Also, they're not designed for the learning environments that we have in play right now for our scholars. So when you look at that brand new Federal High School and you think about the school you had before, it's night and day, right? So we have to think about that. But here's the other part. We have elementary schools that were built. If you look at October 1, 2016, the capacity was to hold 9,160 scholars. Currently, we have 10,263 scholars in those schools. We do that by way of portables, we move libraries, and they're everywhere. The problem with that, though, is they're sometimes in spaces that are not necessarily conducive to learning. But think about what's going to happen in terms of growth. By 2026, we anticipate we'll have almost 11,000 elementary scholars, with buildings that were built to only hold about 9,200. So we will be coming to our board soon talking about a bond. Another way to think about that is this. Currently, we have a class size at around 20. That's what we're staffing for. We need right now 63 additional classrooms or 3 new schools today. If we were to staff at the 17 number, which the state will be funding for soon, we would be needing 146 additional classrooms or 7 new schools. So that's a way for you to quantify, to think about our infrastructure needs. In 2005, that was the last voter-authorized school construction bond levy. And in 2018, that will be when we'll complete the construction of Federal Way High School and the levy collection related to that. We've got a facilities planning committee. Will you raise your hand if you're in the room and you're on our facilities planning committee? We have a broad-based outreach. We have about 90 people that are on this committee, and their job is to make a recommendation for the community and the superintendent around phase 2 school construction that I will then seek board approval of. One last thing to consider. Kent, Highline, Issaquah, Renton, Auburn, Tacoma have all passed bonds. They're right now renovating, modernizing, expanding their schools. We've got to be able to stay competitive if we're going to be educating our scholars for that world-class education that they deserve. Lastly, I want to share with you one event that's going to be happening. It's our first annual STEM Exploration Night. We're inviting all of our K-12 students, all 23,500 of them. It's going to be at Federal Way High School, and the point of this is for our scholars to start to see the jobs that are out there. We're inviting the Boeings of the world, Microsofts. They're going to have booths. They're going to talk to our scholars about what it takes to make it in the workplace. We're also going to have universities there to tell our scholars, if that's what you want to do, here's the kind of courses that you take. And then we're going to have scholar booths where our robotics teams and other scholars will talk about what this looks like in the classroom. So we want you to get the word out about our first annual STEM Exploration Night, Thursday, February 23rd at Federal Way High School. So as I wrap this up, I want to tell you that students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That was that whole piece that I was talking to you about when I was thinking about beliefs. You've seen the data, and you can see that we're beginning to see incremental improvements in our data. And I know it is because every one of our 3,000 plus team of educators know the targets are all focused on common goals. I will sometimes have someone in the community say to me, Dr. Campbell, you have a really big job in turning that district around. I want to say to you, each of you today, we have a really big job. This is our school system. It's all of our responsibility to ensure we have the best school system in the state, if not the nation. And it begins with our belief about our young people in our schools. When you hear someone saying those kids in Federal Way, push back on that. Push back on that. We cannot continue to talk about our scholars as if somehow they're less than. It begins with how we speak about them. Your children may have gone on and graduated from school here. You may not have a child in Federal Way Public Schools, but make no mistake about it, it is in everyone's interest to lift up and lean into our schools. The fate and prosperity of Federal Way is bound to the health of our schools. I challenge each of you to grant the scholars in our system the belief and hope that you would have required as you channeled your 8-year-old selves this morning. Mentor, volunteer, donate time and resources, and most importantly, believe in the positive possibility of our school district. I challenge our city our city officials to provide additional opportunities for our scholars, like summer employment, youth sports, and most importantly, an economic plan that continues to attract jobs and careers for families and for students post-secondary. We're well on our way towards continuous improvement. The road is not a vertical path. Instead, it is a slope that will have setbacks, we will make mistakes as we try new approaches to improvement. You will hear us applying these strategies like restorative justice to keep our scholars in school while holding them accountable to learn from their mistakes. John Dewey once said, if we teach students today as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. We will be relentless in our focus on the needs of our scholars. We need each and every one of you in this room to join us in making Federal Way Public Schools the very best it can be. I will leave it to our scholars to provide the most compelling reason to believe in them and to act upon those beliefs as a greater community.
I could help anyone do anything.
I am the next generation, and I am very trustworthy.
When I do something, I don't slack off. Instead, I do as best as I can. And if I don't do it correctly, I learn from my mistakes.
I believe that we are all leaders and not followers, and I think that we all have a chance to make something better.
I know that in the future it is students like me, scholars like me, that can make difference in our community.
When I'm doing my work, I try and make it the best it can be, and I am hardworking and I'm dedicated.
The community should believe in you because I'm the future of this world.
The community should believe in me because I already have ducks in a line and because I have goals and I'm determined to get to where I need to be, where I'm happy and successful.
I could do way more than they actually can ever do.
Because I want to help the people that I love and the people that help me. Because we are all scholars. Believe in me.
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 Believe in me. Believe in me.
Believe in me.
Believe in me. Believe in me.
Believe in me.
Believe in me.
Believe in me.
Believe in me.
So, Team Federal Way, let's put our minds, hearts, and actions together to build an even better world for our children. Thank you.